I tell students, if you want to do pathology, if you're not sure, if you love art and illustration, just consider it because it's visually oriented at its core. We're looking at slides. We have to recognize pattern, color, shapes, and sizes, and we have to be able to interpret art piece right on our microscope slide. So I feel like every day we're looking at things and deciphering what is going on and finding an underlying message or theme to it. So at its principal core, we are somewhat artists. All of us are, and being able to find patterns and recognize those things.
Welcome to the People of Pathology podcast. I'm Dennis Strank. On this podcast, we explore pathology, laboratory medicine, and forensic science. This is episode 200. I want to thank all of you for listening and for enjoying the sound of my voice. Anyway, today we have a special guest, Dr. Meredith Herman. In this episode, we dive into the fascinating world of pathology art and the recently published paper, #PathArt, From Glass Slide to Canvas with the mission of enlightening the burdens of life. We'll discuss the origins of pathology art, some ethical considerations to remember, and some ways pathology art is used in education. All right, here's episode 200 with Dr. Meredith Herman. This is going to be really fun. Now, mostly we're going to be talking about the paper that you published. So you were first author on this paper. It's called #PathArt, From Glass Slide to Canvas with a mission of enlightening the burdens of life. Before we get into the paper, what was the initial idea of this paper, the initial inspiration?
On Path Twitter and social media, people have started using #PathArt whenever they're displaying some painting they've made or some beautiful histologic image or some characteristic textbook image of histology. And we as pathologists and other pathology related fields were like, wow, that is beautiful. And we have just started calling it art. And I think it kind of started with Jared Gardner coining the term, and then it's been like recapitulated, reused over the years.
Sure.
And, going into art myself, I was like, well, this is a really interesting thing to think about. So kind of worked with one of my good friends, Casey Schuker, who initially brought the idea, said, hey, you should do this. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Kind of started thinking about people who were on Path Twitter, or PathX, who were posting this #PathArt continually. And so I got in touch with Alex Sotarian and Zayed Al-Satari, Gloria Serra, and then Marilyn Bowie, who wrote the book about pathology art.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I was like, this is the great team. So I just started figuring out who my team was going to be, and we went with it, and we met and just kind of kept evolving this of how can we expand and make this something and make sense of all of this. So this is kind of how it segued into this paper.
Okay, how much, because, and we're going to get into some of this with the paper, like there's a lot of research, some history. How much time do you think went into just like the research of all of this stuff?
I feel like when you're starting with a new topic or something that has not been published, you kind of have to think outside the box. So this is where all our creative minds kind of came, like, how are we going to elaborate on this topic? So yeah, we went into the historical perspective, and when you think back to DeMay's textbook in cytology, how they started drawing cytology, pap smears, using colored pencils and paints and just trying to show in a textbook format before we had cameras and computers how to teach educational principles of pathology before that technology was around. So art has been a way of communicating information for as long as humankind. So we went back in, not too far back, but far enough back to kind of start where was it first discussed in books and literature about use of illustrations in medicine. And that's kind of where we started going off of. We talked about it in surgery and radiology and pathology, of course, and, trying to look back and say, where was this art? Where is this coming from, and why was it done? So it was done as a necessity to teach, not so much as an art form, like, hey, look at this abstract painting I did of just for fun. It was more of an educational point.
I mean, you said you didn't go too far back. The paper goes back to, I think, like the 1600s or something.
Oh, yeah.
As the beginning of this. I think that's pretty far back.
I was like thinking, oh, we go back all the way, to the Egyptian times or no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I think we kind of decided to start where we first started seeing published literature or book that referred to this. So that was our basic or start-off point for this, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, like you said, this was done out of necessity because there wasn't a way to take pictures of any of this stuff. You had to draw it or paint it, I suppose, right?
Yeah, and there's also another caveat, educational or conveying principles and drawing, but also creativity is really important in learning as well for people who are visual learners. We look at diagrams, illustrations, we draw it out on whiteboard, trying to understand how physiology happens and the feedback loops and how the cells are put together. So it's kind of like, yeah, the educational point keeps coming back to us and we can further appreciate it in artistic form as well.
Okay, that makes sense. I wanted to get into why path art or art in general is sort of a natural fit for pathology. Like,
That's
what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a no-brainer. I tell students, if you wanna do pathology, if you're not sure, if you love art and illustration, just consider it because it's visually oriented at its core. We're looking at slides. We have to recognize pattern, color, shapes, and sizes, and we have to be able to interpret art piece right on our microscope slide. So I feel like every day we're looking at things and deciphering what is going on and finding an underlying message or theme to it. So at its principal core, we are somewhat artists. All of us are, and being able to find patterns and recognize those things. So it makes complete sense. People who are in pathology are very creative. There's a lot of musicians, singers, people who are in plays, other artists themselves, sculptors. It is very common to find people who are somewhat creative in their hobbies and their free time. And it is very eye-opening when you start asking, well, what do you do for fun? And they all have some creative outlet. So we're very left and right brained at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had that conversation before too, and it does seem like they're probably the vast majority of people in pathology have some kind of creative outlet as well, just like you said. Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm curious because you mentioned the aspect of visual learning. Do you think, I guess in your experience, do you feel like there's a majority of visual learners in pathology as well?
There's
I mean, that would seem to make sense.
It makes sense. I remember like learning about different learning styles because I was trying to figure out my own learning style when I was in school. And they're like, there's the visual learners, the audio learners, and like the technical hands-on learners, people that just read and just reading textbooks, they can just read from that. But I think whether we want to admit it or not, we're all visual learners. And we could be learners in
Mm.
various variety of the textual and hands-on and audio learners. We're learning in all different ways, but I feel like we are all visual learners to some degree. So yeah, totally. I think people might not admit it. They might not realize they're visual learners until someone else said, "Hey, you really like to draw things out. You really, this is something that you do." And it's like, "Oh, of course, I am a visual learner."
Hmm. I found that lately because where I work, we have residents, and sometimes they ask a question about whatever specimen they happen to be grossing, and I find myself drawing pictures of things, and then like, okay, this is how you slice it and stuff like that. And I started to realize the whole visual learning aspect of that. Like, apparently that's how I function too.
That's
And
amazing. Well, illustrations in the grossing, Lester's manual and other grossing books, you have to draw it out before you start cutting the real thing.
yeah,
So it's our way to kind of think it out in advance and talk it out before we actually do it. And yeah, I think that's wonderful that you're teaching students through the drawing. I think a lot of people do that. I see that on a regular basis as well.
sure, sure. Okay, so I want to go. You mentioned the social media aspect, particularly Path Twitter, or I guess we're calling it Path X now. It was kind of the initial inspiration for this paper. And I want to go back to that. How do you think, because now what was Path Twitter? It's been around for a while now. Uh, How do you think that's kind of influenced the pathology community?
I think it's been a positive force of good in pathology. I think that we're recognizing it as a real phenomenon now. It's not just, happenstance, the hashtag path art just for the fun of it. I think people recognize it as a legitimate thing that they can appreciate and recognize. I think as the pathology community continues to grow online, people start to say, oh, you know what, this is path art. And they start to follow it and see it more and recognize it. So I think it's definitely grown into more of a movement than just a thing that someone just put out there. I think it has always kind of started as that core of pathology and art together, but it evolved into a bigger thing that's used on a global level. And we did look back at statistics of hashtag path art, how often it was used on different platforms, and it is quite impressive. We did get some numbers over a span of a few months, and I'm sure we could dig more into it and get additional data. But I feel like every day I go on PathX or Path Twitter and I see Path art at multiple posts, but maybe it's just my algorithm. I just see it all the time. But I think more and more people are using it and starting to say, I want to draw pathology art. And from just sharing on my social media, I've had students all over the world reach out and say, hey, I'm really inspired by your work. I want to do path art. And I connect with people from all these different countries and they share with me their art. And they're like, look what I drew. You inspired me to do this. And then from there, a lot of people have started doing pathology competitions, pathology art competitions within their departments. And then the Pathologist magazine and CAP and ASCP, they have these pathology art competitions. And I think there is more interest in it now, just seeing that it's there on social media, have it more on top of their mind. So I think it's continuing to grow into this worldwide phenomenon. And what do you call it? Like the art movement, essentially. It is an art movement
Sure.
in our specialty.
I wonder how that affects, because we all know that pathology is not one of the most popular specialties in medicine. And there is a shortage of, well, all of us, basically.
Yeah.
And I wonder if these path art competitions, if they help to promote the field, or maybe, younger people who have no idea about this field, maybe that's how they discover it and they get into it from path art.
Yeah.
Do you think that happens?
Oh, yeah. This morning, I actually received a message on Instagram. I was asked to do a pathology painting event over Zoom to a group of undergraduates in Ohio. And they're just undergrads interested in anatomy and physiology. So they're just like, we're here to learn anatomy. We've maybe taken a histology class or maybe not. We just enjoy the subject. And they found me on social media. I said, sure, I'd love to paint with you guys. And we got to talking about medicine and pathology, and they were asking questions about what is your job? What do you do? I got messages afterwards saying, thank you for painting with us, but also providing us with great advice. And now as a result, I'm thinking about doing pathology, going into medical school. So just those little interactions from painting started conversations about future job outlook. And I tell them, hey, the job market's great. And I just kind of address the stereotypes that I'm there and just put it out there because I might be the only pathologist they meet in college, or soon they will meet more. So, try to be a positive force for good and advocate for the specialty while also being this creative space and draw and illustrate and paint and maybe discover a new
Mhm.
talent they never thought they had.
That's amazing. That's got to feel so
Oh,
rewarding for you. You're combining these two interests that you have and influencing a group of people. That's
I
great.
love it. And it brings, fuel to my fire and things that I love to do and combining my art hobby and passion with my outreach and education passion as well. So it's a beautiful blend that I never intended to go this way, it just kind of happened. And the feedback I kept getting, I was like, wow, like this is actually something amazing and it's continuing to evolve and using the art as a medium to communicate and promote the specialty as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So now you're influencing people to do path art and get into pathology. But when it comes to art, we know these are images from patient specimens. And so there's got to be some ethical considerations to keep in mind with this kind of thing. So let's talk about some of the ethical considerations that we should keep in mind when creating and especially sharing path art.
Yeah, I think that this is a big topic that we wanted to delve into because we
Hmm.
lightly say, oh, this is beautiful. And we think to the patient, that cancer is not pleasant for that patient. They are going through a rough time. They might die of that disease, but here we call it beautiful. And at first, I didn't think much of it until Dr. Bowie was bringing it up, like, oh, why do we say it's beautiful? It's not that beautiful. But to us, it's visual and
Right.
appealing. So ethically, pathology images are anonymous. We're not saying this is John Smith's biopsy. It's pretty neutral, anonymous, and we're not trying to exploit this specific person's diagnosis. We are showing the art as an educational perspective and in an artistic perspective. I think back to the book that Dr. Bowie wrote about how this patient had a horrible malignancy and they wanted to paint to kind of have more control and feel like they had some understanding of what they were going through and dealing with. And I think it helps patients also grasp what they have in their body and understand their disease. And I have done lots of commission paintings for people that have various rare diseases. And I've gotten way more good feedback from people about how much they love the art, how much it touched them and made them cry, or they feel like they can grasp their illness and they can see it and can almost like have control over it in a sense like this is my disease, this is what doesn't define me. So I've been painting like example is someone that had a child who had a chromosomal abnormality and they wanted me to paint their karyotype. Now, that diagnosis for that child was not pleasant. It was very shocking and saddening for the family, but they saw the beauty in it. And they said, we want to show this karyotype as abnormal as it is. Our baby is beautiful and we love him for who he is. And we want to embrace this because not everyone is perfect. And we love our baby, whether or not they're perfect or not. So I think people can really appreciate the beauty in disease. So, and I think they also find it visually appealing as well. So there's just a couple different ethical standpoints. And I always just try to maintain neutrality when I share it. I don't, this is the most beautiful tumor ever. I might just say this classic textbook picture, or, here's an abstract painting, or just call it pap smear, call it lymphoma without giving it any specific details that would compromise the patient information.
Yeah, a couple of good points there. I mean, I say that all the time that one of the paradoxes, I guess, of this field is the things that we find the most interesting, the most beautiful are the worst for the patients. I'm curious though, when you mentioned painting the karyotype, how does that affect you? You know what I mean? Like emotionally, that's got to be hard.
I feel very touched and honored to do that for people. I could feel sad, and of course, I feel sympathy and grief for them, especially if I know the people. I
Hmm.
also take great pride in being able to see and understand what their tumor looks like, and no one else can. So for me to be able to put it on the paper and they can see it for what it is, and they want to see it and they appreciate it, like they reach out and say, "I want this painted." I am deeply honored. I'm so grateful you would ask me to do this for you. So I think it's kind of like being the doctor in a way, in the artist. And one, you get to journey with people through different stages of life and disease. And it's a privilege to have. It's a big responsibility, but you have that honor and privilege that no one else gets. So as a pathologist who doesn't see patients directly,
Right.
I feel more connected to the patient I'm treating and I get to understand what they go through on a human level and also on a microscopic level. Makes sense of their illness.
And that's a good point. Like it connects the pathologist with the patient, which, like you said, you don't usually get to do. And even in Dr. Bowie's book, it was the same kind of thing. It was connecting with her patient the same way, which that's an interesting connection because it's not the typical way.
Right. And I think people think that pathologists are antisocial, that we don't help people, we don't like our patients. That every case that I do is a patient. I see hundreds of
Yes.
patients a day. I may not be there directly, but I feel like I'm a part of their role just as important as any other specialty is. So having that connection, I think, is really important for pathologists. They don't lose touch with the human side. I think it's very easy to kind of dissociate yourself. You see a lot of sad things in medicine, the
Yeah.
autopsies, you see, horrible malignancies what people go through, but I think it helps bring that humanity to our work and make it even more fulfilling.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think it's a good way to because like you said, the patients don't get to see what their say tumor looks like.
Hmm.
And this is a good way for it. And I think many of them would want to see what it looks like. I think in Dr. Bowie's book, she said something about the patient, something to the effect of he wanted to know what the enemy looked like, or something like I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing. But I think this is a good way to maybe educate patients
Yes.
about pathology.
Definitely. It kind of comes into like ties in, health literacy, to
Yeah.
giving our specialty more visibility to the public. We are
Hmm.
often hidden from the public eye. They don't know we exist. But I think there's a push for us to be more visible and we want that connection. We want to be appreciated and we want to show what our work and the value it brings to patient care. So I think these are great points I didn't even expect to talk about. And I love this ethical and then humanistic approach to art. Like there is more meaning than just putting feet on canvas.
Right, for sure. Okay, we're talking about educating patients. Do you think there's a role for path art in medical education, educating medical students? I mean, I know you've got the textbooks with photos and things like that. What about incorporating art into that type of education?
Yeah. There are some initiatives within medical schools to have like a biomedical illustration electives. I know there are, quite a few out there that do it. Dr. Evelyn Lockhart is a mentor of mine. She's out there in New Mexico, and she is putting one together where she teaches students how to, start painting and drawing out anatomy and histology things for education. I know medical schools will also have some kind of initiative to teach and integrate illustration into their curriculum. And I know for a fact a lot of textbooks and question banks employ artists and illustrators to draw out these complex concepts without having to do like the exact anatomy image where people are like, it looks all red and brown. I don't know what I'm looking at. So I think there's a way to kind of pick it apart and put it in a way that people will understand at a very beginning level, and even more professional levels, they'll understand what it means. So there's a lot of groups out there, probably more than I can name, that are incorporating more of an illustration, digital art into education and curriculum. As far as like painting, that's kind of like direct painting sessions are also really nice. I hope to kind of do more of those through Zoom and in person. But I think having the digital option to draw is really helpful. And I think that more programs probably should teach some biomedical illustration lessons in there for people are interested.
That's interesting. And I think as we're moving towards digital imaging or digital pathology, I wonder if there's going to be some sort of intersection of digital illustration with digital pathology.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I think since we're moving the digitized platforms, I think we're going to need to have models and methods of teaching that are on the same level. I think as we move to that digital level, we got to be digital. There are digital textbooks. There are digital histology slide, whole slide imaging that I'm working to hopefully do like digital gross imaging as well, like being able to interact with the gross specimens digitally. Stay tuned for that. But yeah,
that piqued my interest right there.
we got another one. So yeah, I think
Okay.
there are multiple modalities and people are starting to like catch up, like, oh, we could do this. So I think
Mhm.
I wonder there's going to be an increased demand for biomedical, like 3D illustration. How that's going to interact with education and teaching, I don't know yet, but I know we use it in anatomy. We have anatomy interactive models we use in education.
Okay.
There's a lot of modalities, and I'm very excited for what the future holds in this.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. It's going to be interesting. Some things you said there I never thought of before. This is the People of Pathology podcast with our guest, Dr. Meredith Herman. We'll be right back. Labvine is an interactive online learning platform where laboratory professionals learn, develop, and discover by sharing knowledge and building on each other's experience. The platform provides global access to internationally accredited laboratory-specific courses and other resources developed by lab specialists like us for the laboratory industry. Labvine is free to sign up, and you can use the link in the show notes to get started. If you think it would be nice to have a helpful reference about digital pathology, I have some great news for you. Dr. Alexander Zhurov has written a book called Digital Pathology 101. All you need to know to start and continue your digital pathology journey. This book will help you whether you're a complete novice or a digital pathology trailblazer. You can get a copy of it by following the link in the show notes. Now for the rest of my conversation with Dr. Meredith Herman on the People of Pathology podcast. One of the things that you address in the paper, and I wanted to talk about, is now you're making art, whether it's drawing, painting, any other modality, but it's portraying a serious disease, cancer, for example, and sometimes in a lighthearted or artistic manner, maybe a little bit abstract. And people might have concerns about that, like you're kind of making light of cancer.
Right.
All right, how do we address this concern?
I've gotten some negative feedbacks on TikTok, like, "How dare you do this? This is so wrong."
Oh, really? Okay.
And I appreciate every perspective, and I can see where they're coming from. And I know the internet is a very crazy place, and so I try not to take it too heavily, too
Uh-huh.
personally. That's why I just kind of rephrase how I post my artwork or how I phrase things and how I convey it to a general public. So if I'm putting it on TikTok, that's a broad worldwide audience. I got people how I am displaying my art in a way that's like not going to be too lighthearted, but it's going to be enough to pique their interest. I don't know if there's a perfect answer for it because it is what it is. This is lymphoma. How do you make it not lymphoma without saying it's lymphoma? You're going to say, this is what lymphoma
Right.
looks like. And for sure, someone's going to say, oh, my aunt had lymphoma. And the algorithm's just going to know something about their family history or that they were searching lymphoma and it's going to show up on their For You page. But they might already be interested at a baseline. And I think there's a way to kind of curate the content and the video, audiovisual images in a way that people can appreciate it without feeling offended. So if anyone ever says something negative, like, how dare you? And I say, I never mean this to be negative or hurtful to anybody, and as an educational perspective and showing what we look like under the microscope and how disease looks. And they
Mhm.
may or may not understand. I don't want to fight. Then yeah, just my intent, and people take it different ways. And art hits people different ways in a negative or positive way, and you can't control how people will perceive it. But you do the best you can, your end to be as neutral and positive as possible.
That's one of the good things about art is it can be interpreted
Mhm.
different ways depending on the person. In this case, that could be problematic, but like you said, it comes down to your intent. And it sounds like for you, your intent is to educate. And
Sure.
and so, yeah, and that's a good intention. And I guess if people take it the wrong way, I mean, it's understandable.
Exactly. I'd say like 99.9% of people, totally not like a real metric, but in my mind, so my interactions with people, 99.9% of people really love it and they really get into it and they think it's so,
Mhm.
they're science nerds. They love looking at anatomy and physiology stuff. They're maybe in the medical field of speaking about it. For them, this is so exciting. I love learning about this. I'm glad I'm not the only person that likes looking at cells under the microscope.
Yeah.
And some people might have had a really bad experience and losing a loved one to a certain disease. And some people say, my dad just died of this. I really enjoyed this. I bought a print to remember him. So I think people handle things differently in whatever stage of grief they're in. Their openness to grasping what, happened to their loved one or to them is they handle it in different ways. So it's so variable. It's hard to predict what might happen.
Mhm. Okay. That makes sense to me. All right, we've been talking about the paper so far, but let's get more about you. So, as you mentioned, you're an artist yourself. So, how did you get started in art?
I have always been an artist since I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Um, I never heard the story until recently, but I would draw a bunch of, drawings with marker and they'd probably just look like child drawings, whatever. But I thought they were beautiful art pieces. And I would sit my family down and I would put all the art out and I would do a whole art exhibit. I must have been 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember this, but that happened apparently. I'd go to preschool and my mom said I would just run to the drawing table and I would just draw with the markers all day. And they couldn't get me away from the art table. So I just always had this artistic thread in me from the beginning. And I just kind of kept honing into that. Of course, with, college and med school, I kind of lost a little bit of that because I was so focused on studying and exams. But I
Hmm.
kind of got reconnected to it during COVID. And of course, everyone had free time. And I said, I just wanted to paint something, make something, and kind of like a mental health thing. I just want to feel good and paint something for fun. And I did, and I started painting pathology. I don't know why, I just did. And I was
Okay.
really happy. So I love painting the cells. I brought out my books, I was painting cells, and yeah, this is actually really cool. And then a few years later, I kind of dropped it a little bit. I was painting here and there, just trying to teach myself basic techniques and painting other things like landscapes and animals or whatever I think of. I just decided to start painting histology because I saw on TikTok and social media there just really wasn't a whole lot of there was a lot of histology medical education, but not like my art. And I said I would like to do an educational artistic page on the platform that would promote education in pathology. So seeing that
Okay.
need for increased exposure or outreach in medicine, especially in pathology, I wanted to kind of combine it with art. And I wanted to be known as like the pathology artist, the person who's teaching and also painting and balancing all these things. And she don't somehow manages to maintain her hobbies and interests. So that's kind of how it started unfolding. And I would try to make videos like educating, this is that, and this is how it happens, and kind of playing around with social media. Like, how can I portray this? So I don't know if I haven't figured out yet, but I know I was really inspired by like Leonie Shawn from LaMelo Podium. I really loved her work, and I started seeing some additional artists popping up as well. I was like really inspired. Oh my gosh, this is great. This is a great thing to actually doing. So that's kind of how
Mhm.
it evolved over time.
Okay. So tell me about white coat artistry, because this is you're basically selling some of your art pieces,
Yeah.
right?
This was actually my husband came up with the name. I had originally thought
Good name. I like it.
he's a lawyer, he's brilliant. And
Okay.
it was like, yeah, people are reaching, oh, I want to buy your art. I said, they're just saying that. I'm like, no, I think this is something unique. And I'm like, well, I don't see a whole bunch of pathology art out there. I saw some, but nothing that really hand drawn, commission pieces, like unique to what my style was. And people wanted to sell it. So, well, I got to make this an official thing. Like, how are we going to do this? So we started on Etsy, just made it easy while I was in med school, finishing up rotations. So I was cool. And I had a white artistry. I like it. And I didn't see any
Yeah.
else with that name. I said, we're going to take it. It's ours. So we made it official with an LLC. And so it's our official, like, art thing. And I'm very happy to have like my own distinct art business for this. I didn't know how it was going to go, like how popular it would be or how much interest there would be. So in the first year, I was just kind of like seeing how it went, had a variety of paintings, just a few that I had, got them scanned, made them prints, offered different sizes, had to learn how to put it on my Etsy page and get the mock up
Hmm.
right. So a lot of like business side, I really enjoy when I do all that. Then advertising on my social media. And I started getting more commissions and requests to like specialized painting. And, oh, like I could paint that. That's really awesome. I love it. People loved it. So I said, I'm going to keep doing this. Like it brings me so much happiness. I come home from work, I paint anyway. If it's for someone else to make them happy, I love it and I'll do it. And it's just continued to evolve. So I think almost 2 years now since I started it, it has continued to just be a great aspect to my career and additional second career.
That's interesting that you started it during med school because I mean, I haven't gone to med school, but I feel like there really isn't a lot of spare time to do something like that.
I don't know why I just did it. It
Okay.
just kind of clicked to happen. I never planned out using it. Oh God, yes, sir. I never thought about it
Mhm.
until the opportunity presented itself. I said, now or never, and now's the time to do it. And I'm learning pathology anyway. I know what I'm painting, and it helped me learn it better too. Like I know all the different features, and I go into the microscope and I say, "Oh, I just painted one of these," and I can diagnose it because I know the features right away. So it helps me learn better. Going back to the education piece, the more you
Uh-huh.
understand it, the more you can recognize it. And so it made me a better resident, pathologist, teacher, because I painted the beams in the microscopic level. I know what to look
Uh-huh.
for and I don't miss it. It's kind of like come back full circle, like, oh, it's not just for the art and therapy of painting. It's educational for me as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. So currently you're a pathology resident, which I think if I'm mathing correctly, your second
Yeah.
year. Okay. Now we talked about how you got into art. How'd you get into pathology?
Well, I was born with a microscope in my hand. I'm just kidding. No, I'm the first in my family to go to medicine.
Okay.
I originally thought about going into something like optometry or I didn't know. I wanted to do something health professional. And when I got into college, I was at Michigan State at the time. I was like a general like pre-med. I didn't know what I wanted to major and I didn't know what majors were. I just was like, I'm here to study and make them of myself. And I met some friends who were studying biomedical laboratory science. And I said, well, that's cool. What is it? And they're like, it's great. You learn how to be in a lab and diagnose things and work in a microscope. So that sounds super challenging and intimidating. I want to do it. So I went and the advisor said, sign me up. I want to do this major. We discussed options, going into doing an MLF internship. And then I thought about that for a while. And then ultimately I was connected with a mentor who was a pathologist. And that totally changed my perspective. And he was really nurturing, supportive, and said, you might want to consider pathology. Talked about med school, going to med school, and it kind of just evolved like I would be a better fit as a pathologist. As much as I love the laboratory seeing, I really wanted to be the one making a diagnosis at the microscope and being involved in patient care on that direct level. So it ended up working out well for me. And I went through med school kind of knowing I wanted to do pathology. And that kind of what led me to here today. So it just kind of all happened and I just took it for what it was and really found my love and joy and passion in this field.
That's great. From what I understand, I mean, going into medical school and already decided you're going to go into pathology is kind of rare.
Yeah, it's kind of the weird one out. You want to be at the microscope and you get all kinds of comments about your decision of going into pathology. And I took it as an opportunity. Well, I never really got offended by it. People would say things like, "Oh, you like dead people, and you're not a real doctor." And I would take it as an opportunity to say, most of my patients will be living, and you're not going to make decisions about their course of action and treatment until you wait for pathology to return. So
Right.
I kind of took it as an opportunity to address stereotypes, and I just continued down the course. Like nothing's going to make me as happy as pathology. And I saw the other areas, and I appreciated them for what they did for patients. And I took it as an opportunity to see how can I better assist these fields in pathology. So besides all the hate and all the stereotypes I dealt with, it was fine. But I realized I'm not the only one who loved pathology as a first year med student. There are other people out there in that position. So I try to normalize it. Say it's okay to like pathology as a college student. It's okay. Like you're not weird.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And now you're in a place where you can combine all of the interests that you have together.
Yeah. And
which is not many people can do.
yeah, I'm very lucky that it was all kind of panned out. And my program has been very supportive of my artistic pursuits. I helped
Okay.
coordinate painting events for, the wellness committee. We held painting sessions for the faculty.
Oh,
I put together a pathology art competition for our department. We have all the art hung up in the main department entrance. So I was like able to take my passion and joy and just kind of like put that energy into something that could help other people. So we host these events and we bring in painting and pottery. We just all kinds of painting things
mhm.
activities. And people say, we really look forward to this. And it was such a huge turnout the first time. We had no idea how it was going to play out. And the turnout, we actually ran out of supplies just in our department. So
Wow.
there is a lot of artistic people in our department. And I'm like, I'm going to keep planning these art events because people love it and it helps bring wellness to the work environment. And I'm all for it. I love to be a part of that.
Okay, that's great. Like everything you're saying, this has been so inspiring for me because it's like I have to take that back to where I work. And right now I'm thinking about maybe we should do an art
For sure.
competition at my lab,
For sure. Yeah, I'll send you the details how to do it.
Oh, great. I'd very much appreciate that. Thank you so much. This has been a real interesting conversation. I'm glad we finally were able to connect here. And I think we're going to do this again pretty
We
soon.
need a follow-up sequel.
For sure. For sure. Love it. Dr. Meredith Herman, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Dennis.
If you're looking for another episode of the People of Pathology podcast to check out after this one, here's a clip from my interview with Dr. Marilyn Bowie as we talk about how we have a personal connection with patients.
So this interaction, the connection was really transformative for me because this is the moment I finally knew it is such an honor and a privilege to be a healer as a pathologist. Our patients' courage and humanity is really inspiring, and every patient behind the slide deserves my best effort. So after that day, when I look at the cases, I will look at the patient's name and try to make that personal connection. It's no longer a case, it's a patient. Even the patient didn't even know I existed, but I know I connected with them and I will do my best to take care of them like my friends, like my family.
You can hear more from Dr. Marilyn Bowie in episode 99. All right, so big thanks to Dr. Meredith Herman. The intersection of art and medicine is often seen as an unlikely pairing. However, in pathology, it seems to be a natural fit. The paper we discussed, #PathArt, From Glass Slide to Canvas with the mission of enlightening the burdens of life, sheds light on this relationship, demonstrating how art can enhance understanding in pathology. As Dr. Herman pointed out, art has played a pivotal role in the communication of medical knowledge for centuries. We talked about how the historical perspective of pathology art, tracing its roots back to the 1600s, when illustrations were the primary means of conveying complex medical concepts. These illustrations were not merely artistic endeavors. They were essential tools that bridged the gap between understanding and application in the medical field. By examining this historical context, we see that art has been a fundamental component of pathology education long before the rise of modern imaging techniques. Beyond its educational value, art in pathology also reflects the human experience. The paper discusses how the hashtag #PathArt has emerged on social media platforms, where pathologists and other medical professionals share their artistic interpretations of histological images. This movement not only celebrates the beauty of pathology, but also fosters a sense of community among professionals who share a passion for both science and art. Pathology images, often described as visually appealing, present a unique ethical dilemma. We talked a little about the importance of anonymity in these images, ensuring that they do not exploit individual patient experiences while still conveying the educational value inherent in their complexity. A bigger issue, though, is referring to a tumor as beautiful. This may seem insensitive at first glance. Concerns about the appropriateness of portraying such subjects in a lighthearted or abstract manner can lead to criticism. Addressing these concerns requires a thoughtful approach that emphasizes the intent behind the art. Rather than diminishing the seriousness of illness, art could serve as a means of expression, reflection, and even healing. It can provide a space for dialogue about difficult subjects, allowing both patients and medical professionals to explore their emotions and experiences related to disease. The act of creating art in pathology can serve as a therapeutic outlet for both the artist and the patients involved. Dr. Herman expressed a sense of honor and connection when painting for patients, acknowledging the emotional weight of their stories. This relationship between the artist and the patient transcends traditional roles in pathology, creating a shared journey through the experience of illness. By engaging with the human side of pathology, artists and pathologists alike cultivate empathy and compassion, reinforcing the notion that medicine is not solely about clinical data, but also about the human experience. Patients rarely get to see their tumors or understand what they are up against. The artistic representation of such medical realities can demystify the disease process, making it more accessible and understandable. A patient's desire to see what the enemy looks like, as paraphrased from Dr. Bouie's book, underscores the importance of this visual connection. Art can transform the clinical into the comprehensible, facilitating a deeper understanding of one's condition. And this is actually the inspiration behind The Healing Art of Pathology by Dr. Marilyn Bouie. Incorporating art into medical education also holds promise. As we discussed, initiatives within medical schools are beginning to recognize the importance of biomedical illustration and creative expression in the curriculum. Programs that teach students to draw and paint anatomical structures not only enhance their observational skills, but also encourage them to engage with the material in a more meaningful way. This hands-on approach can lead to a deeper understanding of histology and anatomy, moving beyond memorization into a more nuanced comprehension of the human body. Dr. Herman's experience coordinating painting events and competitions within her department illustrates the profound impact that art can have on workplace culture. By organizing painting sessions and an art competition, she created opportunities for faculty members to engage in creative expression, which proved to be immensely popular. The overwhelming turnout at these events highlights a latent desire among professionals to explore their artistic sides, suggesting that many individuals seek outlets for creativity amidst their demanding roles. Art provides a unique avenue for employees to step away from their routine tasks and engage in an activity that promotes relaxation and joy. As always, I'll have links in the show notes to everything that we talked about today. Don't forget you can follow this show at People of Path on Twitter and Instagram, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. And speaking of LinkedIn, if you are a pathologist assistant or an aspiring pathologist assistant, there's a new group on LinkedIn called the Pathologist Assistant Shadowing Network. We all know that one of the most challenging requirements for the aspiring student is finding shadowing opportunities. This group aims to make that easier by providing a place for prospective students to connect with practicing pathologist assistants who are available for shadowing. So check that out on LinkedIn, and I'll also include a link in the show notes. Thank you for continuing to share the show with others. Together, let's inspire the next generation of pathologists and laboratory professionals. This show is a member of Health Podcast Network. Thanks for listening. I'm Dennis Strank, and I'll talk to you next time on the People of Pathology podcast.